So when y'all talk, if you can make sure that you're talking into the microphone so your viewers at home can hear you. If you'd like to go ahead and start.
The meeting is now called to order. I will read the FOIA statement. In compliance with the Freedom of Information Act, notice of this meeting was submitted by fax to the Spartanburg Herald Journal, posted on the bulletin board in the lobby of Town Hall and on the town's website. Next is roll call.
Ms. Lemons? Here. Ms. Easler? Mr. Kennedy? Ms. Hardy?
Here.
Ms. Pennell?
Here.
Mr. Mitchell?
Here. Next, we have our minutes for November 4th, 2024. I think everyone had copies of the minutes and have read them, so are there any corrections? If not, can I get a motion to approve these minutes?
I motion to approve the minutes.
Second,
Second.
vote. All those in favor?
Yay.
Aye. And next is the December 2nd, 2024 minutes. Are there any corrections? If not, can I get a motion to approve these minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second, can I get a vote?
Second.
Second. Third.
Everybody now.
Minutes have been approved. Next on our agenda is the Town of Packard zoning ordinance discussion.
Again, I'm Jeffrey Gilbo with the Council of Governments. Thank you for having us back here again tonight. I have given you 3 documents up on your workstations there. The main one we're going to be talking about is, this is sort of the draft compilation of the future zoning ordinance. You'll see in there, there's a bunch of areas that are highlighted in yellow. That's, the things that still need to be discussed. And we'll start going through some of those tonight. As part of that, I have another document that starts with Chapter 4, Animals, because we have some questions about that. And then a copy of the new proposed outdoor recreation district for us to talk about. So you can see it's got a lot of the information in here. You can see what this is going to shape up to look like. As I said, we're just going to kind of go through this quickly on some of these early sections, because a lot of this we've already covered. So really the question that I had is dealing with section 3-7. Which is page 3-6 in this proposed ordinance. Annexation and zoning is what it's entitled. And really, this is just really a question of how you want to treat property as it annexes into the city. Some places will say that every piece of property that annexes into town has to be zoned R20 single family, and then after it's annexed in with that designation, if they want to do something different with it, then they have to go through a rezoning process to get it to what they eventually would like to do. And that's the way I have it written here. Others, like when my previous job in Anderson, we assigned the zoning at the same time we annexed it in. And so people didn't have to wait and had to go through a whole separate process again after going through the annexation process. Not right or wrong. It's just what the town's preference is. I think it may encourage people to annex a little more if they know for sure that they're going to get the zoning that they want at the time that they're annexing it in. But again, it's just a question for the group, how you've treated it in the past and how you'd like to treat it moving forward. So.
We currently, the way it's currently done is as properties are annexed into the town, as they are annexed with a zoning district given at that time by council.
Okay.
And it's most likely what's in the vicinity out there.
And so you'd like to keep it that way then? I mean, personally, that'd be my preference to do it that way, because again, if I'm a property owner and you're asking me to annex in, but you can't tell me for sure that I know that I'm gonna get the zoning that I want, that's a risk for me as a property owner, so I'd rather know that at the time of the annexation that you're gonna have that, so, I'm happy to keep it that way if you'd like to keep it that way moving forward.
My only question would be like the properties that we have left in the areas we can annex in. Like, is there a lot of areas still that could be commercial or industry or anything like that? Because I mean, if we're gonna add industry, obviously it probably makes sense to add on to the industrial area that we already have and move that way with it. Like, how do you determine like where we would possibly be annexing in? But you're saying it would be closest, the zone closest to it, it would fall into something more like that, was the way it works now?
So normally, kind of give you an idea, we've had some properties on like Zion Church Road. Mostly those are all residential out in that area, and it's residential properties. It's homes that are wanting to annex into the town for both police protection and for garbage collection. And so we would annex them in with the zoning that's currently out there, which would either be neighborhood general or neighborhood village, or yes, one of those. It'd be a residential kind of zoning for them to be coming in. Now, in terms of industrial and future land use, there's 2 large parcels that are on 176 that y'all had previously set up as industrial use. What's the quarry is, I think what you were referring to is it's like a mineral or
Well, in the new zoning, that would be industrial as well,
Okay.
so.
but it would kind of depend on, you know, what the reason for them to be coming in. If it's a home, it's most likely going to be some type of, you know, kind of residential zoning on there. But you know, there could be some situations, you know, some properties on number 9 that could be either commercial or they could be residential, and we could end up setting it up. You'd probably want to look at your future land use map and kind of see what you kind of had designated for the area, what that zoning would end up being as it comes in.
Okay, so
See, the problem with the future land use map with that, though, is that areas that are outside the town don't really have a future land use category. So you're looking at what's around there already that's in the city and making some judgment calls from that. You know, it would help you more on a rezoning where it's already in, has a zoning classification, it has a future land use designation, which may not match the zoning for a variety of reasons. And so, but there are a lot of cases where even if it's a different type of single-family residential, you know, somebody wants to do R10 lots, but everything next to it is R20, but that's not what they want, you know, or a PDD or an FRD district where there's other things, you know, where it might be logical for it to be a different category than what's there adjacent to it now. So that way, you know, again, I would always go back to is if I'm the property owner, how would I want this to happen? And I would want it assigned when I annex the property, because that way I know for sure that, oh yeah, we're gonna give you the zoning you want, no problem, just go ahead and annex it in. And then something happens, there's a change in council, somebody changes their mind, and all of a sudden, I can't do what I want with it now, and I'm stuck with my property in the city when I wouldn't have wanted it there if I couldn't have done whatever, A, B, and C. So, I'll change that.
And that's how that currently is? It's case by case, essentially?
Right.
Okay. And is the wording you'll have to change it on this one? 'Cause
Right,
right now it says
I'll change it on
R20.
here to address that, yeah.
Okay.
Like we annexed in, right off there on 176, just off of 150, Edisto Gas is a new business that just came into town, and they wanted to be located in the town, and so we annexed them in as a commercial property on 176. A lot of those properties on 176 are currently zoned as residential properties. Your future land use has it as either commercial or industrial. And that may be something, I'm hoping that's something that we end up fixing with the zoning ordinance and the future zoning map as we kind of correct some of that stuff. But in this case, we annexed them in as a commercial property.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's, case by case is definitely probably more.
All right, so if you skip forward to 3-11, we had talked in the past about, under permitted uses, garden or other non-commercial horticultural or agricultural activity, not including the keeping of poultry, livestock, or kennels. But there is some language in there, and so that's this other one I passed out, Chapter 4, animals. And so that's Chapter 4 from your town code, where it talks about animals in the city. And then what your language, so your language from your current zoning ordinance is on the last page of that. It says, keeping of large animals where permitted. Large animals may be kept inside the town limits. No more than one animal per 2 acres, no hogs, no predatory animals, sanitation must be maintained. Animals the size of goats and smaller, including potbelly pigs, shall be addressed under the town of Packlet's nuisance ordinance. Going through the code that was online, I didn't see anything labeled as a nuisance ordinance in there, but you do have the Chapter 4 on animals. And so what it talks about is no person shall keep, maintain, or harbor within the town any of the following animals. Anything that is prohibited by law, any non-domestic species, any farm animal except domesticated female chickens as permitted according to section 4-5 of this article. Unfortunately, when you go to 4-5 of this article, it's performing animal exhibitions. And there's no other language in what's online about chickens. And so I'm not sure where that language is in your code, but it wasn't in what we had available to us online. And so,
So can we not permit the female chickens to stay I mean, they're.
well, we can, I'm just trying to figure out if we want to keep something like that in the town code is fine. I need to change this section in all the residential districts to allow that. Because right now it says, not including, not keep poultry, livestock, or have kennels. And so, if you're fine with the language that's there, I think it needs to be, if it's somewhere else, or clarified in your code as to exactly what those rules are. Because right now it just says, what did I see? Again, you can have domesticated female chickens, but doesn't tell you how many, doesn't tell you if there's any rules attached to it, like you have to have a permit, or, you know, there's rules for the coop in distance from property lines or anything like that, that you see sometimes in some of those ordinances that allow the chickens. And so I just don't know where that language is. And so I'm fine to keep it like it is. If you have that other language, I just need to figure out how we're going to change this sentence in all the residential districts to reflect that. So you can have garden or other non-commercial horticultural or agricultural activity. It may just be then not including the keeping of livestock or kennels, and take out the poultry part.
Can we add it to conditional uses or like permitted use, well, not just permitted, but maybe a conditional, even like a kennel? Because I mean, I'm sure there's some places, they're way out there that it wouldn't
A
hurt.
lot of places don't like kennels in residential districts for the obvious barking reasons.
Right.
And so commercial kennels are usually, we usually see it in like that highway commercial kind of district, your highest and biggest commercial district, because it's the furthest away from residences and all that. Now, that's not talking about, you know, I got a little 4x4 pen that I could put out for my dog sometime. That doesn't really count. But a permanent kennel, you know, somebody breeding dogs, that's not really going to be allowed under there because it's a business in a residential district. But so if we want to keep it in the town code, that's fine. And we'll take that, strike poultry out of there. Or if we want to do it as conditional uses, I'd like to see what the rest of your language is to know how to put it in as a conditional use.
I think we should.
Is our objective here to make this town a city where people aren't allowed to have animals?
No, I'm saying it's fine to have the chickens, I just,
We
you sort of have rules, but they're
It's
not.
our town code, it's
Let
the
me ask-
municipal code.
What are we aiming for?
Let me ask you, so how do y'all feel about farm animals in the town of Packlet? For or against?
For,
Well, there's horses around the corner from me, and they've got 22 acres. Why
So that can be addressed with the residential agricultural district, which would allow farm animals that we have in here.
It's not, it's right down, it's right by the post office.
Right,
So it's not in, it's in a residential area.
yeah. But we've added a residential agricultural district
By you,
to this ordinance,
yeah,
which would allow some of that.
by the church. Where that big tree fell on that house,
They have horses.
a ton of horses
Yeah,
back
back
there.
behind, it's like behind the library and stuff, it's like
Yeah.
back to
The-
the, yeah.
I mean,
Horses are one thing, but like we have a serious issue with dogs. I mean, kennels,
well, that's my, see,
like-
that's my problem is that.
horses don't bark. Like the kennels,
We have a serious issue. We need to control the dog problem in this town. That's what needs to be addressed. This is not a problem right now. The problem right now is the dogs. So
Right.
I think that's something we need to address because every day, somebody, and what I've been told is there's nothing anybody can do. So we need to find something that can be done about it. Because I've had 3 pit bulls get in my, I paid $8,000 to have my yard fenced in, to keep people and dogs out of my yard. I had 3 pit bulls, I've got pictures, getting in. I had put up big stones under my fence because they dug under my fence. This is a hot topic for me. I don't care about chickens, I don't care about horses, I don't care about swine, I don't care about anything but these dogs that are running around.
I think
That's
anything that
something.
could be a nuisance. I don't know how loud pigs are.
Well, yeah, pigs
but
are
like-
dirty.
Well, let's,
Like-
let's get back to the farm animals, at least for now. And I can understand it on a property of 22 acres, it's one thing. But let me ask you, a property that's a quarter acre or, a third of an acre, having horses or pigs or all that other kind of stuff.
Well, that could be regulated.
How
That's the
much of a
conditional.
nuisance
That's
are
what
they?
I'm saying.
I don't care if
I
they
think
have
we
like
need like a
a
conditional.
dinosaur on their property, as long as it's not bothering the neighbors. You know, it's,
That's how I feel.
Yeah,
is it loud? Is it smelly?
So there are 2 districts, I think, in your current ordinance that allowed, and you're thinking mainly
Large
horses and
animals.
cows,
That
right?
means large animals.
Right, like
a
A horse or a cow, right, because you
So what
need,
would a goat be?
so this says,
you can't.
animals the size of goats and smaller shall be addressed under the town's nuisance ordinance.
Okay.
Which again, I wasn't able to locate, so I'm not sure exactly what it says in there. And this does have language about barking or howling dogs,
That's a problem.
and talks about, you can file a complaint for that, but, this does not really talk about, dogs running at large, in here. There is a section about, animals at large, but really it talks about larger animals. Horse, mule, swine, sheep, goat, cattle, but I don't know if you have other
Well, I'd
language.
like to know how we're gonna address it.
So
So the dog, that's probably gonna be a town code issue,
Yeah,
not a
we
zoning
can't.
issue.
So
So
I
that's
think-
more of a nuisance issue, which is in your town code language and not what we have, so.
I think our goal here is quality of life, so if it's, I would rather nothing be regulated that is not affecting someone else's quality of life. So
Agreed.
we'd have to kind of lean on your experience, what has been a problem? What has affected the quality of life of neighbors?
Yeah,
There's no reason to regulate anything unless it affects the quality of life of residents. So
Can
what
I-
have you found in other towns that has been an issue? Are horses a real problem? If it's on a
most
small
towns don't
lot?
allow, most towns and cities aren't gonna allow horses because the
I mean,
lots
I
aren't
guess
big
the
enough.
question is why? Like,
Because the
what,
lots aren't big enough, if you're gonna have a horse out there, unless you're gonna feed it, and buy hay for it all the time, you need a couple acres to support a large animal like that eating grass. And
Or-
so,
So
Or
my-
the
most of
horse,
times you don't see that,
or the
so,
horse or the cows getting out, which happens very regularly.
that's the only thing I can think of, because like, if,
Right.
okay, let them feed it with hay. That's their prerogative if they
Right.
want to. If it's not if,
the other part of that, with the large animals and small
Smell.
lots, is the animal waste, and so you're gonna
Yeah.
have odor issues.
Yeah.
That people will, even where, we, in our extended family, we had a small dairy farm. And, it's been there for 100 years. And, people started to build houses next to it and complained about the smell all the time. And we're like, you knew the farm was here,
Yeah.
you know, and so.
I
but-
agree, like, I don't think we should be regulating anything that's not actually a nuisance to existing residents.
Where I've lived before, how it was written in the ordinance was, first 2 acres, you could have 1 horse, 1 cow, whatever. Each additional acre after that, you could have 1 more additional large animal.
Mhm.
So if you had 5 acres, you could have 4 horses. If you had 10 acres, you could have 9 horses.
Yeah.
That's how it was written.
Yeah, and in Anderson, we had one piece of property that was zoned residential agricultural, because a council member wanted a horse. And so they drafted a new ordinance for him so that he could do that, and it was, you had to have an acre per animal. So if you had a 1 acre lot, he could have 1 horse.
Because they're racers, that makes sense.
So,
They need
right,
one.
and so that's why you often see, you had to have a larger piece of land for that. 1, for the grazing, 2, to give some separation for odor issues, things like that. Which is also part of why you don't necessarily always want kennels in smaller areas, you want the commercial kennels in a more commercial area. And so, but again, a lot of that, you know, for this, in residential districts, you know, it really talks about non-commercial activity, and if you're keeping cows, that's a commercial activity. You know, horse, not necessarily, you know, you could just ride a horse, you know, as a hobby or whatever, but,
Commercial, it's
well,
agricultural.
well, that's commercial. Agriculture is commercial. I mean, so it's a business. You know, if you have a cow and you're selling it, it's a commercial activity. I mean, it's not a store,
Can-
but,
I understand y'all's, thought about just, having it and, as long as it doesn't cause a problem, but then once it causes problems, then it's a code enforcement issue. And it's gonna be a constant code enforcement issue on a regular basis. And so I think, I could be wrong, but, as I have a farm myself, I do not wanna live beside a farm because of the smell. Now, I keep my chickens nice and clean, but not everybody does. Most people don't. Having a pot-bellied pig, there's gonna be a lot of mud and,
Can I ask you, because I know that there are many people that do keep chickens, I know people have goats even, I don't care that they have them, I'm not gonna report them or anything, but, have you actually had people coming to you with complaints about this
Yes.
stuff? So like, and when you're going there, is it an issue? Like when you're looking at it, is it just, oh, my neighbor doesn't like me, so they're mad I have the pig and they told on me? Or are you going there and you're going, ooh, we
I mean,
have to.
it's a smell. It's, not everybody takes care of their pot-bellied pig or their chickens and makes sure that the smell is not an issue. I mean, I remember when I was going with chickens, the amount of feces that we had to get rid of on a regular basis, and where do you dispose of that? I mean, we had barrels and barrels of this stuff. And where do I put that? Do I ship it off? It's not gonna be able to go into the garbage can. So where do I put that stuff? Do I put it on my property? I'm just looking at,
Talking about for barrels and barrels, how many chickens
yeah,
talking about?
I had about 50 or 60 chickens.
That's a lot of chickens.
Right, I need to understand where and that's when someone says chickens are okay, how many chickens?
because this
And
doesn't
then-
say.
Well, can you
So
give
see
us,
this other section that I don't know where it is.
can you give us some examples of the actual complaints that you're getting? Like, are they about chickens? Are they about the other animals that aren't even permitted in there to begin with? Like, what are our actual issues in town
So
that we're
we've got-
having with them?
I think we're becoming a community where, I think the chickens are okay, roosters become the problem. Roosters make loud noise, wake up people early in the morning that, maybe work third shift. You don't have to have roosters to have eggs. And so just have hens, as long as the hens are kept in a small area and maintained. The problem is we're having issues where hens are just roaming all over the whole community.
And you're getting complaints?
And so
about
they're scratching up flower beds, they're crapping all over the place, I know I've got them myself, and they roost on top of stuff, they roost whatever they can find. So they're roosting on cars, they're roosting on whatever, and so then there's feces all over the place.
So it's not that they have the chickens, it's that they're not keeping them on their property and stuff. It's not, nobody that's keeping them nicely is getting complained on. It's the ones that are letting
Absolutely.
them.
And I agree with Mr. Williams on there, like, for instance, there are people that can keep goats in their backyard and you'd never know about it.
Yes, there are.
There are people that can keep a pot-bellied pig in their backyard and you'd never know about it. But unfortunately, a lot of times in government is you have to regulate for the bad apples that are out there. Otherwise, you have a code enforcement nightmare. and you're constantly going after them, sending them a letter, trying to fix the problem, then if they're not fixing the problem, then they have to pay a fee. Then they refuse to pay the fee, then we issue a bench warrant. Then we're at that point, we're arresting someone for violating our ordinances. So in a perfect world, like I said, you could have goats in the backyard and they're well taken care of and they're really good with them. Those aren't the problems. It's the other ones that are out there. And it's just, I will say from my perspective, at the end of the day, it is y'all's call on this. But I think there's a thought from people that you move into a community, you move into a city. If you want to live out in the county, you have a farm, go for it. But there's kind of an expectation that you move into a city and you don't have to deal with certain, issues of smell and issues of animals getting out or just problems with that sort of thing.
Now, Anderson, I think we over-regulated it, but you had to get all your neighbors to sign off on it. So if your property touched my property and I wanted chickens, you had to sign a form saying that you approved of it. You had to, it was a $25 annual fee. We had to do an annual inspection to make sure that you were maintaining everything properly, that everything was clean, that we hadn't had any complaints over the year before about the condition or the noise or the smell or anything. And it was a giant pain. And some people walked in, I gave them the form, the neighbors had to sign, and they just walked away because they knew there was no way, this neighbor hates me, he's never going to sign it. You had people, we probably had, at its greatest at one time, we might have had 6 houses with chickens. And they rotated out because people found out, oh, these are really expensive eggs. By the time I build a coop, by the time I buy all the chicken feed, and I do all the work cleaning it up and doing all that. So they kind of rotated out. You always had a couple, but they usually didn't last, because once people got into it and realized what they had to do, they were doing it for their kids, the kid gets sick of it, they didn't want to do it anymore. So, I am perfectly fine if y'all want chickens. I just need to know how to write it. So, and again, this says poultry, so, that could be turkeys, that could be chickens, that could be, I don't know what else we would normally think in there. So, you're specific, not turkeys or anything else, but, in most places I've seen, it's just chickens that they allow, but usually 4, maybe 6. I think most commonly I see up to 4 and no roosters, so.
I feel like we need less regulation,
Yeah.
not more.
Right.
I agree.
In my shoes?
That's my,
Well, I see
I
what,
live here,
yeah,
we all live here. My opinion is, I feel like we need less regulation,
Unless
not
it's
more.
dogs.
I agree.
Unless it's dogs. The regulations are for
And if
problems.
they are not, go back to this, but he brought it up, not me, so we're gonna talk about dogs again.
No,
Well,
if you're gonna regulate one,
because their dog's out, and then a week later, their dog's out again, and you fine them $200, and then a week later, he's out again, you fine him $300, it's not rocket science.
Well, I think regulations are good when there are people who don't do what they're supposed to do. Because now, I had a neighbor who had chickens. They were supposed to be kept up. But every day, those chickens was walking around in my yard, pooping all over the place, and I did not like that. Because every time I came out, there was chickens. So the regulation is not for the people who take care of their animals or their pets or whatever. The regulations are for people who don't.
So we need conditional uses, I think, like that, something that says if you're going to be keeping animals, you're gonna be required to have some kind of way to keep them penned in, and if they get out, you lose these privileges. That's just, you don't get to keep animals anymore.
Well, that's the thing, because they shouldn't be in their neighbor's yard, they
Yeah.
should be in their yard. Fence your yard, put up put something up, respect for your neighbors. And
Right.
you don't want your animals out roaming, I don't want
the
my
point
animals
I
out
was
roaming.
making with the dog comment is you have a dog problem, other people have a chicken problem. So you've got dogs in your yard, other people have chickens in their yard. If you want less regulation for specific species of animals, like that's based on your anecdotal
Okay, but
problems.
well, there are
Like, we need, right,
Chickens out running. I
need-
don't see it, but I hear roosters all the time, all over
right,
town.
so we're gonna have to have some regulation.
It just says if you have chickens or poultry,
must be
they must be in a contained
Right.
area.
So I'll put together
And like
as a
so many
conditional
per
use, and then we'll look at that next time. The dogs are gonna be in the nuisance code, they won't be in the zoning. So that's not for me to address in here, because that'd be in the nuisance code. And I don't know what that language in there says now. The only thing I've seen is in this code with, on the animal one, it talks about the barking, excessive barking. But again, that's, how do you define excessive barking is always a problem. I always look at it from the code enforcement part, because I used to have to do some of that, and, how somebody's gonna argue with me about it, well, what's excessive, I mean, and so, this has a definition in here. Noise that is discernible and can be heard inside a neighboring residential dwelling by persons of ordinary sensibilities. So if your dog barks once and I can hear it in my house, is that a problem? Probably not, but if it's outside for 8 hours barking the whole time, that's a problem, Other codes, not the zoning. And so, what I'll do for now is, I'll keep, not including the keeping of livestock or kennels, and take out poultry, and then I'll do chickens as a conditional use, with some conditions in there, and then we can look at that next time and see how that gets worded, so.
Just so you are aware, just with code enforcement on there, so, once, like for instance, the dog issue, first off, we have to identify whose dog it is. Is that, if that dog owner lives outside of the town of Packlet, I can't do anything about that. If the property owner lives in the town of Packlet, then at that point I issue them a letter and give them 15 days to kind of fix it. After 15 days, if they haven't, then we issue a summons. A summons, then a month, 2 months later, as they come into court. If they don't show up to court, then we issue a bench warrant. Not everybody is really excited about doing bench warrants, arresting someone for a code enforcement issue. So I'm just kind of putting that out there. It's not as simple as just we'll fine them and then they'll pay it, because they don't normally
I
do.
understand that, but maybe we focus on that for a little while and focus a little less on other things, because it's a problem.
Are they threatening?
I mean,
Like-
sending code enforcement out to look around and see who's doing what in town. How about send code enforcement out to pick up dogs?
Is there an
Because
animal
they're
control
everywhere.
officer in the police department?
No, the animal control is part of the county.
The county won't respond, they won't come
No,
within
they
town
do nothing.
limits.
I had a dog at my house recently, a great pit bull. I put it in a crate and took it to the police department and said, this dog's in my yard, do something with it.
I've
And they
been,
called animal control, and animal control came. Yes, that was me. And I felt bad, because you know what's gonna happen. It's a pit bull that was roaming, not in its yard. I drove around with it in the bed of my truck in the crate, looking to see if I could find whose it was, like around my block. Nothing. So I took it to the police department. It was probably euthanized, which is very sad. If you love your animals, you're gonna take care of them. You're gonna keep them contained to your yard. I didn't wanna take it there, but you can't just have pit bulls running loose around. I have grandkids, I have dogs, and
I think,
I just don't want them in my yard. I paid a lot of money to have a fence put up, to keep people and other people's animals out of my yard.
what about stray animals? Whose does that fall under? Does that fall under zoning, or does that fall
Be
under
a
code?
nuisance code.
It
so
all
that'd
is
be a
code?
town-
Because I
townwide
think that's
code.
the problem, Renee. I don't think they do have owners. I think we're a dump-off place,
Some of
if I'm
them
being
do.
awesome.
And the problem where I am is that I'm right on the line of Central Packlet. So they come to my property from Central Packlet. So Packlet can't do anything about it. And Central Packlet doesn't have police. It's county, so, we're all left to deal with this problem that I feel is not addressed as much as it could be. Like I said, we should be having an animal control truck out there picking up these animals. Hey, come pick up if this is your animal, you've got till the end of the
And then what?
That's where they post all these animals. Christmas Day, there was like 8 dogs.
When they don't pick it up, then what?
Then they go
They get
to
euthanized
Greenville, they go to Spartanburg, they go to wherever animal control takes their animals.
to get euthanized.
But you
Well,
know,
if you love your animals, they're not gonna be out
Well,
on
not everyone loves them.
that's a
I mean,
scary situation
what happens
because
is they
we
get
have
euthanized.
animals in other places that attack people. So that's a scary situation because, now me, if I see a pit bull in my yard, I won't go out the house.
I kept her
So it
22
really
years.
needs to be addressed some kind of way.
Well, that's like my neighbor's behind me. She has so many dogs and she breeds them. She has pit bulls, which killed my neighbor's dachshund. I'm sitting on my front porch. Here comes 2 pit bulls trying to kill my dogs. Almost bit me. I finally made it in the house. I went back and talked to her. Nothing happened.
In that
Shoot 'em.
situation, who
If you're in danger, shoot them.
on your property.
I didn't even have a chance. I was out there letting my dogs go potty.
If you're
Yeah,
coming after
if
me
you
or my
want,
kids,
Yeah, send 'em
dogs
out.
getting
And she went
shot.
to court over the dogs, so she got a fine, but she
What did
still
you say
has
again?
pit bulls.
Yeah, no.
Huh?
What did you
It's
say?
not about
I said if
wanting
the
to
dog's
shoot it.
coming after me or my kids on my property, it's getting shot. Just, that's
Maybe you want to say that louder?
And you're allowed to do that. I
Yeah,
don't wanna do that.
that's like a,
It's not my job.
on your property, if you're being attacked by an animal, shoot the animal.
All right, let's move on to page 3-32. This is the first page of the commercial district sections. And this is really it's a question for all the commercial districts, but or the 3 of them. So as you see highlighted there, as a permitted use, residential uses in accordance with the multifamily district guidelines. And so I have that in, not in the sort of the central business district 1, but the C1, C2, and C4. So basically, that would allow residential according to your multifamily guidelines that we've talked about. So could be single-family, duplex, apartments, depending on the size of the property. But that would be allowed as a permitted use in each of those commercial districts. There's pretty standard language in there, but I just want to make sure that y'all are fine with that. So, you know, the density that we have in here is not great anyway, so it's not overly dense. And so I have that in there, but I just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with that. All right.
What page are you going to?
That was C32, but it's any of the like, 3-4, excuse me, 332.
Yeah, you're just saying that like in that transitional zone,
Which is identical.
okay.
So. So like, for example, if you had, what you see a lot of times is where if you have 2 different multifamily districts, you know, you have one that's kind of dense and one that's more dense, you might see in the general commercial, it would allow the residential to that more dense category because you're expecting more density, more activity in that kind of district. But where you only have the one here, that same language for all of them. All right, and I asked this last time, but I couldn't remember what the answer was. On page 3-54, which is part of the PDD language, do y'all have your own land development regulations or do you use the counties?
We do
So
not
for
have that in
subdivision,
our
talk
zoning.
about road construction, all the infrastructure work and all that, those land development regulations that address that.
I don't know if we've got that in there or not.
Okay.
It's not, that's part of the PPDs, right, where you plan the stuff, it's so many, it has to be like 25 acres or more. and you
Well,
get
this
is that-
specific language, what it talks about here is really about subdivision plats. And so if you're building a subdivision, you have to build roads to a certain standard, you have to put in water and sewer lines to a certain standard, sidewalks, all that's covered in a separate document called land development regulation. They used to be called subdivision regs, but a few years back they changed it to the new name. And so
I
some
don't-
towns have their own, some use the counties. I think you probably use the counties, but I wanted to make sure before I put that in there.
It is
So-
not in our current zoning. 'Cause
It's
I think
not in
I've
the
asked-
zoning, it'd be a
yeah,
separate
Because I've asked
document.
about that before, and
So-
I don't know.
Because
Because I would rather us control it.
Well,
Can-
you'd
can
have to
we
adopt a
not-
whole other ordinance then, I mean, because it talks about, like, when you're building a road, it's 4 inches of stone, 2 inches of binder, 2 inches of top coat, it's gonna be X number of feet wide, it's, sewer lines have to be built to a certain standard
Yeah,
and
we
all
would-
that.
We wouldn't have all that, it would,
Yeah.
because we would just basically say you would have to build it to the county standards.
Yeah, county standards, so, that's what I thought, I just wanted to make sure I put it in there right.
What page is that on?
That was on 354, and it's also gonna be in 357 with the FRD, but it's the same question, so. If we go to 4-14, that's the sign ordinance, it's the second page in the sign ordinance. We had talked about this some before, and I just wanted to get some more, now you've had a little
What section?
a
What
couple of
section are
these
you in?
things just to get some clarification. 4-14 is that page number at the bottom of the page. So it's the first one is 4-2.4 prohibited signs. So under there I've got prohibited signs, off-premise signs, except billboards and bench signs. Off-premise signs would be anything from, McDonald's having a sign down the road to a billboard to, some areas you see in public areas, they have a bench and the bench will have advertising on it. That would be off-premise signage.
What about like an elementary school, when they put up their like register for that's not good, that's because it's temporary, right? This is only permanent signage.
This is permanent, yes. We'll talk
Okay,
about temporary
okay.
signs in a second, but, so, do you have billboards? Do you want billboards? Because you can say no billboards, as off-premise, so you say no off-premise signs, including billboards, or you could allow billboards. But again, in terms of off-premise permanent signs, that's what you're thinking about is, a business that has a sign down the road, Burger King this way, but it's, on 2 4x4s with a plywood sign on it or something pointing you down the road. That'd be an off-premise sign. So, or a billboard, when you're thinking of the permanent ones. So,
I don't think we want those.
I would love to restrict billboards in our like downtown urban area. Keep those on 176.
yeah,
there-
so what you can do
Is
is,
that addressed in here?
170.
there's a section, we'll get through it.
These prohibited signs are considered permanent signs.
In this section, they're talking about permanent signs,
If
right?
someone stuck out an A-frame for the day,
Right, we'll talk about that in a minute.
maybe, even if it wasn't on their property, that's not prohibited, because it's considered not permanent.
So like an A-frame sign that you can take in and out?
Right.
Yeah, that'd be covered by the temporary sign ordinance, which
Right.
we'll get to in just a second, further on in this ordinance, in this section. So if we put off-premise signs except billboards, and then again, going back to, because we talked about it, but signs placed or painted on a motor vehicle or trailer and parked or mounted for the primary purpose of providing signs not otherwise allowed by this code. So, either a non-functioning automobile or, like some of the things I've had to deal with is where they have a car with a wrap on it. It's a functioning car, but they park it on the front lawn. So that would not normally be allowed as a sign because they have another sign, but they're putting it there specifically to be an extra sign. And I'm like, I don't care about the wrap, but it's gotta be in a parking spot. And so really it's about, not so much that there's sign language on a car, whether it's a magnet or the whole wrap, it's where it's placed on the property. It's gotta be a car that you're using, it's gotta be in a parking spot, you can drive around town all you want, it's fine. But you can't just have a sign on a car or a truck and just stuck out there sitting in the grass where would be extra signage than what's allowed under the regular code. So, I know people have different opinions about that. A lot of people like them, I look at the barbecue restaurant with the old truck out in front of it, you know, clearly not operational. Some people like that, some people don't. So right now, what this would say is that you cannot have that, so.
Is there a way to, I mean, I like that look, that old antique truck, but I don't know how you would write an ordinance to, allow for someone that clearly has an artistic eye versus the guy that's parking a van, just a regular work van on his
Right.
lawn.
That's
I don't know how
difficult
you,
on
yeah.
my end, so.
Could we set it up in, could you set it up in such a way, almost like an architecture review board kind of thing, that the planning commission ends up approving those things?
It may be where you could do it as a variance, where, you know, we'll allow you to have this, but maybe you have to reduce your other sign allocation to make up for this extra sign kind of thing, so you're trading off one kind of sign for another. So that would allow it, but it would have to be counted in that total sign package. And, you know, if I'm allowed 50 square feet of signage and that's what I have, then I can't do the vehicle sign. But, you know, I think it makes more sense to do the vehicle sign and not have a freestanding sign, then maybe you could do something like that. So, you know, might be some way to handle it that, to allow more flexibility in there. Business goes out of business, not really a business anymore, and the old truck is still there rotting away. So you have to be careful about the language you put in there about how to handle things like that, so. But- Which actually, that goes for any kind of sign, not just a truck, you know, when the business goes out of business, so.
Can we have something there, because I've worked in other communities where if a business moves out, it's responsibility of the property owner to remove signs of leaving. Yeah, we have that in there.
Let me see, I think I have something to that effect in there, yes. Let me see. I'll have to look and make sure I have something like that in there about that. And maybe under a different section where it talks about non-conforming uses or. Yeah, I'll look at that part about the old signs, but, so just in general, do you want to allow the vehicle signs? And then we can figure out a way to get to it, so.
I just don't know how you'd word it without it being a free-for-all. I mean, I like the idea of, you know,
So-
having some character to the town versus just these cookie-cutter signs.
Yeah, and so when you look at,
But like you mentioned before, it could end up being approved through a variance, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
right, and so when you look at the sign, that's what I was just going to, if you look at the, make sure I'm not missing anything else there, page 4-25, letter D up at the top talks about sign variances, and this is our criteria that you should use when approving one. And so, of course, you have, you know, a sign variance for a site hardship. You know, for some reason, whether it's topography or there's some other physical reason with the property itself, that my sign, maybe it's landlocked and it's behind something else, it doesn't have road frontage, that for a physical hardship, there's an ability to get a sign variance. But then above that, there's also area enhancement. And so you have to meet A, B, and C, or A, B, and D. And so A is basically it's not gonna add to street level clutter, so people can't see where they're going. It's not gonna create a safety hazard. And then either C or D. The adjustment will allow a unique sign of exceptional design or style which will be a visible landmark, or the adjustment will allow a sign that is more consistent with the architecture and development of the site. So you have a little leeway there. You know, it had to be something that, so for example, in Anderson, we had a seafood restaurant and they put up this lighthouse. Now, I'm like, that's a sign, you know, because you're a seafood restaurant. This is an object designed to attract attention to your business, and you can do it if you get a variance, but it's under this because it's consistent with the architecture and development of the site, what's on the property. And so, if you're a car lot and you have, something out, some other kind of sign that's automotive related, then you can probably get a variance to allow something like that. And I'm sure there's other ways you could figure it out to do it. So the variance might be the better way to do it, than trying to
Okay.
word it some way.
Yeah, I can see how this language might allow for that. I mean, that would, as long as there's some workaround for,
All right, well, we'll go with that for then. So temporary signs. You can really get in the weeds in temporary signs, and these kind of do. And so, do you want temporary signs? Do you hate temporary signs? Again, temporary signs, so I'll just go through this example ordinance. This says you have to get a permit for a temporary sign. And so in this case, it was $100, you can have it for 30 business days, twice a year. So, and that could be, you could have one real estate type sign out there, you could have one 4x8 reader board, you could have one balloon sign. But you could have one, you had to have a permit, for 30 business days, twice a year. Now, we would work with them. If I know I'm gonna want a temporary sign out there the first week of each month, there's a way we can make you happy with that. Well, tell us up front and we can kind of work with you on how to do that. All temporary signs must be located on the premises for which they are advertising. So, your business can't have a temporary sign a block down the road saying, coffee shop this way, is what that would tell you.
An example would be, we currently, it's big time in the summertime, is Vacation Bible School.
Yeah,
Is we get signs that are all over town for all the different churches advertising Vacation Bible School, and none of them are on their own property.
Right.
And that, y'all need to determine, is that okay or is that not okay?
Yeah,
I mean, even the town,
yeah.
even the town does that. I mean,
What's that?
advertising Riverfest
Yeah,
at the
the
clock.
town of Packlet puts out stuff
Yeah,
on
I don't
properties that are not.
hate it, as long as they're taken up and they're
Yeah.
not left and they're not ratty.
Yeah.
I think it's, in a small town with an aging community that doesn't use Facebook as much as other communities, because we are demographically older, that's a good way to get the word out. But again, it's gotta be time limits, they've gotta be up-to-date signs, not in the way.
so like Anderson County, what they would do is you'd have to buy a sticker. And you come in, I think it was $1 a sticker, and you'd write the date on it, and you'd put it on the back of your sign, and I think it was good for 30 days, I don't remember for sure. And then, but you could come in the next month and get new stickers, and basically you could have a sign out there year round. And like twice a year, they do a big temporary sign cleanup, and get all the ones, go out and police it, and get all the ones that didn't have stickers on it, or the stickers were expired or whatever, but, the problem is if you have a bunch of them, it can look really junky, and then, if it's in the public right of way, can I put it in a city park? Can I put it in DOT's right of way? Those are some of the questions that are gonna come up from people, I have my sign, so, but can I put 4 stake signs out in front, on my front lawn and have all those advertising different things on my business when I already have my full allotment of signage? So, again, I'm not gonna tell you either way is right or wrong.
Can we just put on there that they have to be removed, within 14 days following the date of whatever event, or could we word it that way? 14 days, 30 days, whatever.
Again, it gets to a policing issue. Patrick's gonna know when they were out there, when the event happened, and most of them are not, well, in my experience, most of them are not, downtown festival related. It's Joe with the coffee shop and Bill with a retail store that wants to put up a whole bunch of signs up and down the road all the time to try to bring more traffic to his business. And now Joe's got 50 temporary signs in your town, or it's the, We Buy Homes guy. I haven't seen those around here, but in Anderson, they're on every telephone pole in town. You tear them down, the next weekend, they're all back up again. And it's
Can
always
it-
a cell phone, you can never find out who the person is that is doing it.
Can it be a issue of quantity? Like you've got, instead of, you don't get an unlimited number, you get 3 or something.
Yeah, so, I mean, Pickens and Jennifer, who works for our office, she acts as their zoning administrator. And, you know, they have certain intersections where they say, you can do temporary sign at this intersection, has to be in this location, you can do it for X amount of days. I had to talk to her more about exactly how she polices that and how that's written. But you could do something like that, you know, if you have common areas where they crop up all the time, you can do something like that. You know, but it's the, you know, I would say, you know, can't have them on telephone poles because that's not your property. It's not your property. You know, it's Duke Powers or AT&T's or whoever, you know, they would tell you you can't do it on their poles. You know,
What about in right-of-ways?
personally, I would say no to right-of-ways, but everybody's different about that.
Right
You know,
away.
what they want, so. You know, with the right-of-way, DOT comes through and cuts the grass, they gotta pull up all the signs, or they just run them over with the mower or whatever. And so.
So I can see how this is a problem. The thing is, like, Packlet's struggling with businesses. Like, we want to be really, really helpful to these small businesses. They come, they go. If a couple signs helps them get some exposure. Now, if we get to a point where we're just this economic driving, you know, thriving town, we can crank down those regulations a little bit. I'm just afraid that businesses that are already have tiny margins in this tiny
Yeah.
town, you know, now you can't advertise your sale without jumping through 7 hoops and paying a fee, and that makes it not worth it.
Yep.
But at some point, yeah, we wanna lean towards keeping aesthetically pleasing town. If there's, I guess we just have to find a middle ground, and that's gonna probably fall on you.
Let me ask you
Find that
this.
word.
This is what you're
Can-
seeing is not a middle ground. This is.
No,
this is
yeah.
Making it tough for temporary signs, you know,
Yeah.
so what you have in front of you is,
Allow
Yeah.
them. I think we have too many churches, the school advertises that way for their 5K and stuff. Is there not a way to say that if they're ratted, tatted, whatever, we consider them trash, they're fair game to be thrown out, tough if you lose what you lose on it? But if it's there, I don't think we have an overly big problem with anybody leaving them there too long. And on top of that, if I'm being honest, we have enough people that run around that tear stuff down for us that they don't linger too long on poles or anything like that, so.
I think the We Buy Houses sign, because I do see those,
the one-
probably the most.
yeah.
Well, we could be more strict on businesses that don't have a business license in town. If it's some guy that came through our town putting up signs, but if it's a known business, has a business license, pays
Well,
taxes
that's
in
why
the
you
town.
usually see language that says if you have a temporary sign, it has to be on your property. You know, so if I'm having a sale, I can put a sign on my front yard that says I'm having a sale. You know, the guy from out of town is gonna put them all up and down the right of way, he's gonna put them on telephone poles and all that stuff.
I don't
The,
think that
the,
should be allowed.
the problem is, with the way the Supreme Court has ruled, is that you have to look at it as a sign. You can't really matter what it says on the sign, because then, you are regulating content and speech instead of just regulating where somebody can have a sign. And so that's where you get into some trickiness with sign regulations these days, because you can't say, well, we want the churches to be able to have it, or nonprofits to be able to have it, but we don't want, you know, an out-of-town business to be able to have it on the same site.
But
Because-
you couldn't draw a line, I know the First Amendment expression,
Right.
you couldn't draw a line with, you have to be within town limits to advertise
Well,
in
the
town
way to
limits?
do that is to say you could have it on your property. Because then, if I'm out of town, I don't have any property, my business is not in there, so I can't put any up. Because I don't physically have a property in the town with my business. And it's not, you have a business and you also own a vacant lot, it can't be on the vacant lot. It has to be on your property where your business is located. So that's how that's usually addressed, you know, to keep the out-of-towners out, because they don't have property, they can't have a temporary sign, so.
Let me ask you, one thing I wouldn't mind is something where if you're gonna put it on someone else's property, that you have their permission. I mean, if, and that was one thing in the last town that I worked with, is you couldn't do anything in the right of way.
Yep.
You can put it on someone's front yard, but you had to have their permission to put it out there. And then, keep it out of the right of way, so you're not coming up to an
Yeah.
intersection and trying to turn and you're looking past
Right.
we buy signs and all that kind of.
I'm just imagining a situation where there's some new business that's maybe in an off the beaten path spot and they just need a little direction, like they put it on a main road, like, hey, we're open in this spot that's, you're probably not gonna drive by and see. In that scenario, I can see as being, pretty likely scenario in this small town, where, yeah, I can understand Patrick's point, if we made a provision, as long as you have permission from the property owner, because, business could open, just no one knows it's there, and if you just put that A-frame out on 9 somewhere and says, 1 block this way or whatever, that might be a make or break situation for that business.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should lean towards allowing it, however we can without overdoing it.
I'm just thinking out loud, but if you did some type of sign application that you came in, there's not necessarily a fee that's involved in the whole thing, but the fact that you're coming in and you've got to prove the fact that the location that you're going to be putting it, that you have permission to be able to put it there, that you have come in and said, I'm advertising X, Y, and Z, and it's only going to be out there for an X amount of time on there, and I'm signing something that also says that, if it becomes in disrepair, that it will be removed. And after 3 months, if you don't come back in here and just meet with us again and just say, I want to keep the sign out there, then it'll also be removed. And that also kind of keeps you from putting it out there, forgetting about it, and that's it. As long as you come by
Yeah.
and renew it.
Yeah, that could work.
Well, and I think if you're wanting people to know about your stuff, why wouldn't you talk to somebody from town too? I mean, that's
Right.
advertisement and word of mouth. Now, the town hall people know to tell somebody else this is going on.
But the only thing I end up saying about this is the people who have been doing this for so long, Vacation Bible Schools at various places, are they going to be upset the fact that
Yes.
now they're going to have to come to town hall first to fill out this whole thing? Now, keeping in mind, there is no fee for it.
Yes, they are going to complain.
What's that?
Yes, they're
Inconvenience.
going to complain, absolutely.
Yes, and I don't blame them.
But,
To be honest, I don't blame them for,
But,
yeah,
because if it's a church, they don't leave their signs out that long. Because they may be Bible school or something like that, just for a week. They might leave it out 3 weeks, and then it's gone.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think I would be kind of teed off.
I mean, my point is that, we may have to do it anyways, but they're going to complain. That doesn't mean we don't do it, but change is just not accepted very well.
And then how
But
are they gonna know?
Yeah, there is the key. I'm gonna go to every church and knock on their door.
I mean, as of right now, like driving around, especially that I've seen on the intersection of 150 and Jerusalem, there's sign clutter. There's just a bunch of stuff that's out there. And I think people have put them out there and they've forgotten about them, or they don't care. And I would love for us to go through there, especially our either Public Works, and just take them all up and just go ahead and get rid of them all. But at the same time, and technically they're in the right of way of DOT, and I don't think they would have a problem with us getting rid of them either.
If they're in the right of way, we would just pick them up.
Well, I mean, we're
Right
not
now.
restricting to be able to get them out of there, right? Like, does the town hold the sway as to whether or not they get to choose to pull that sign up?
Well, with our rules that we had, that said done in the right of way. So if your business had 5 signs out in the middle of the DOT right of way, we'd pick them up.
But I mean, like, say for instance, like these signs that he's talking about that have been obviously sitting there for a long time, there's no question about it. Is the town out of its rights to just go ahead and take it, like you're saying? Like, is there some kind of legal repercussion for you know what I mean? Like, why not just grab them up? Why not? If they've been out there for so long, just, oh well, they're gone, you'll have to pay to
Because
get a new
if
one.
your
you
rules
do.
don't say you can't have them in the right of way, is where you would have a problem with that potentially. You know, it doesn't say I couldn't have them in there. Why are you picking up my sign, you know? So is a potential, I always look at it from what's the problem gonna be,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
what, yeah.
after I write this rule, so.
And
But-
when you really think about it, if a sign's been out there that long, they forgotten it's out there anyway.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
They don't
think they're
care
gonna
if
care
you
that
take
you
it
got
and
it.
throw it away.
And you take it and throw it away, and then they'll say, you stole my sign.
Oh, wow.
Town threw my sign out.
And that's just words.
I mean, the only ones I would pick up and not throw out were political signs. I would call them and say, hey, your sign, you had 50 signs up in our city park. We don't endorse candidates. It's behind the building here. If you want them, come back and get them. I'll leave them out there for a week. And so, for political purposes, I wouldn't throw them away. But everybody else that had them illegally, we would just toss them. So.
And that's in the previous town that I worked in, it was any signs that were in the right of way, they would pick them up, either code enforcement, police department, whatever, would pick them all up. They'd set them up at the city parking deck in the corner, and they would sit up there for about a week or two, and if you didn't come by and pick them up, they're all thrown away.
Yeah, that's, I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, signs people leave like that, they don't care about those signs.
All right, well, I'll take another crack at this section and we'll come back and talk about that too. So I will simplify it. And, on page 4-28 at the very top, 4-2.10 billboards. So what this says is billboards are prohibited within the town limits of Pacolet. And so, we talked that billboards might be okay, but you can say they're only allowed in certain districts. If you didn't want them in the C3 downtown business district, you could say that. You could say they're allowed in the C1, C2, C4, and industrial districts, that they're not allowed in residential districts. We can do something like that.
Can we just say they're only allowed on 176?
Yeah, that would be our.
Yeah, you can do that.
Yeah.
What's the rule for grandfathered in billboards? 'Cause we have one on 9 that's like rarely used. Does it have to be consistently rented? I mean, we don't wanna,
Basically, when they go to tear it down, they could rebuild it, so.
as long as it's up, even if there's no
Unless
advertisement
it
on it.
becomes a point where it's in such disrepair that it needs to be torn down, probably, yeah.
Okay.
And so this is probably more complicated than you need here, especially if you're gonna only allow it on 176s. We sort of had a cap and replace, and so in our general commercial district, there, at the time they did the ordinance, say there were 10 billboards. It could never be more than 10, but if I tore one down here, there was one available permit for a billboard in any general commercial piece of property. And just because you tore it down doesn't mean that was your permit. The next person who came in and asked for a permit would get the permit because there was one available, kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So that's a headache to keep track of and all that, so. Well,
Yeah, but that's what we have here.
What does the rest of commission think about limiting it to 176? Am I alone on that?
No, I think that's good. I don't think we need big signs blocking roads in our town.
That may be easy for you then, to write that section.
You don't want them on 9 anywhere?
I think the direction we want to go with 9 is make it a little bit more of a,
Scenic route.
like, aesthetically pleasing commercial area. What are your thoughts?
I mean, you've got, I'm not sure what all you want to do with number 9, but you've got some stuff you have a lot of stuff that's already kind of grandfathered in. I don't think you're
Yeah.
gonna see a lot of changes.
Yeah, we don't need to like go after people for having them, but just not anymore.
No, I'm not talking about billboards. I'm talking about in terms of what you consider aesthetically pleasing. Because typically on roads, which you have, big parking lots up front, 4-lane roads, that sort of thing, that you typically would have,
Oh,
billboards on.
yeah, signage for businesses, but a billboard for just random, anyone wants to rent a massive, 30 by 20 foot advertisement for a business that's not there. I don't know if that's something we want on 9, is it?
It's up to y'all.
I'm not a fan. I think billboards are
No, I
antiquated.
don't- When you
you
drive out number 9, it's to look around, yeah? Like, You don't wanna be looking at an ugly.
I mean, I'd like to see
billboard.
number 9 become more of a downtown.
I don't.
9 in West Main, that block, more of a downtown versus something you'd see on a highway. You know,
Are you,
176 or
are
an
you
interstate.
meaning like number 9 heading back towards 176 more? Is that what you're talking about? Or are you talking about
Well, that's
heading out?
residential.
So you're
That's-
talking about the ones that head out towards the plants and stuff, that part of number 9 that heads towards Union? Is that where you're talking?
Anywhere on number 9 is either rural, residential, or that kind of commercial district. Outside of PACLA, we can't regulate, so down toward Union.
But that's
wouldn't
what I'm
matter.
saying. I mean, the town owns so much heading towards Union though, right? And there is, do we have limits? End of number 9, like where ours stops. Our border that runs on number 9, is it past Harveytown and all that? Is it all the way down into like where they have that commercial plant type stuff? Or is that into the county at that point?
Commercial plant, Dollar General we're talking
Yeah,
about?
it doesn't get down to Dollar General. It's just
That's way
past,
outside.
probably about 50 to 100 yards past Hart Street.
Okay, yeah, so no,
Yeah.
we definitely wouldn't want a boulevard or a big billboard going through where you have a small residential area there. And then on the other side, coming from 176 is also a residential.
Yeah, the other direction is Phil's and Michael Estates and Morningstar. And
Now, when you write it for 176, can you put it in the code that only properties along 176 can have it? Or does it have to be only US highways or, can you write it just as 176?
You can.
Are you
Okay.
expecting another highway to come through?
So usually.
I don't know if
Change
you
it
would-
then if they
a lot of
decide to
times
build
in
like a-
this sort of thing, you kind of have to put it almost like in generalities, and you can't just.
Well, a lot of times you'll see it by zoning district. So property has to be zoned general, commercial, industrial, something like that, which, most of your general commercial is 176. Your industrial, you got a couple little industrial pieces, but, so you do something like that, you can say,
Because one thing you gotta look at is, at least for right now, there's a lot of there's a good portion of 176 is residential, as of right now. That's your,
residential use, yeah, but
Yeah.
it's gonna have commercial and industrial zoning, so.
yeah, and that's the thing, once you end up passing the new zoning on 176, that won't be the case. And, but it, that's I guess the only concern I have is as of right now, 176 is currently mostly residential. And so if you put up that you couldn't have a billboard in residential, you couldn't have a billboard on 176.
Well, again, that would be on zoning, not by land use. So even if there are residences out there, but they're zoned general commercial, if you say you can have it on general commercial property, then the use on the property matters less than the zoning. So that's the difference, because when you adopt this ordinance, you're also gonna adopt this new map. And so even though it's a residential use on there, if your ordinance says you can have billboards in general commercial zoning, then you can have a billboard in your front yard.
Yeah.
As long as you agreed to put it there, but, so that's the difference. And the same, if you said on US 176, then the same thing applies. You can still have it even though it's residential use.
So the red is general commercial?
This dark red is general commercial, right?
So I think the problem with that wording is it borders roads that are not 176. If you worded it as billboards are allowed in general commercial, you'd have it on, what's that, Dearborn? Deerwood? Yeah. So is there a reason that you couldn't just say it has to be on 176 or facing 176 or?
You might almost want to say within a certain distance of the right of way of 176 too, because that property is on 176, but that property is all the way up to here.
Yeah,
So this property is on 176,
right.
doesn't mean you want a billboard here.
So you'd have it right, yeah, right on neighborhood.
You might want to say within 100 feet of the right of way or something, and give some limitation to that.
Right, yeah.
Not unintended consequences, so. All right, I will redo that and we'll bring that back. I'm gonna skip the next part because that's too much. And then so if you go to page 4-40, we'll do the next couple of pages there and then I think we'll call it a night, 40 through 44. We can go through these pretty quick. So these are more general provisions. I don't want to call it boilerplate language because it can vary some, but it's pretty general language, to address in your zoning ordinance. So 4-5.1, land, water, and air pollution. Basically, everybody has to comply with DHEC requirements. Although I'll change that to it's DES now. So I'll change that. It's not DHEC, right? And then street access. Every building hereafter erected or structurally altered shall be in a lot adjacent to a public street or have access to a public street over a private street in which the property owner has an undivided ownership. However, no private street or driveway shall be provided to commercial or industrial uses through any residential district. Also, no multifamily use shall be provided access to a public street through a single-family residential district. So,
Can I ask a question on this?
yes,
So, I'm not sure if this covers this. We've got some properties that's landlocked.
yeah.
That's not adjacent to a public street. Is this saying that they cannot build a home on a property that does not adjacent to a public street?
Yes, that's what that says. So, I know a lot of people do it with driveway easements. I mean, I understand they have them. I would not want to do any new ones if you could help it, just because those things get lost to the sands of time. And then 20 years later, somebody new moves in and you try to restrict them because you don't want somebody driving over your property anymore to access that house. And so, I mean, this is your ordinance, we can have it any way you want it.
No,
But
I mean,
that's how that is worded. So either an official private drive or a public road, you'd have to have access directly onto that in order to build. Yeah. I don't know how many lots you have that are landlocked like that.
I'm just gonna show this to y'all so
Yep.
you understand. This right here is, or for some reason my cursor doesn't work on there. You see where Cleveland Street is on your map?
Where?
Cleveland Street? Off of Cleveland Street is
That's it.
Towle Drive. Towle Drive is a private road. It is not a public road. And then there are properties that are off of Towle Drive or near Towle Drive that you see where it says Yang Lee Drive on there. I can show you on here. For some reason, my cursor's not working.
Yeah.
There's stuff that says Yang Lee Drive, and people are wanting to build on that. And with this new pass, or what he's looking to do right now, they would not be able to do that.
Is it because Spring Street runs behind it? So what are those little pieces of property that are there?
Now,
So-
if it's an official private drive, that's fine. You can plat a lot off of that, you can build a house on it.
Wilson official, I mean, and that's one thing is like Tao is a private road. But at any point in time, they could sell that property and turn it to whatever they want to.
So no right of way or anything?
No, Tao is not part of, it's not a public road. You can,
Who owns it?
it is owned by,
He had it surveyed in that shape?
he had it surveyed in that shape, I guess with the intent of giving it to the town, but until he builds a actual road on there, right now it's just gravel.
Okay.
The town would not take ownership of something until it's completely done. But you've got some properties like, for instance, this property back here that is not adjacent to a public road, nor is it to a private road. And there are people that are still,
Even down here?
yeah,
How do they access their property?
they're accessing it through I don't know if they've got easements.
Goes through several
Right.
So could they resurvey that into like a flag parcel where they just have a,
So
And
they
they
can't, on some of
technically
these
have frontage.
properties, they're not even, the flag, for a flag parcel in there, the pole of the flag still does not go onto a private road, nor does it go onto a public road.
I know they'd have to buy a section of the adjacent.
So that property right there, would not be buildable.
You'd have to build a road or a private, official private drive up to it,
Right.
which I've seen before. We made people build, there was a platted road, but the road had never been built. And they had to construct the road up to the point where they could access it with their driveway. It touched their property, and so that became their responsibility to build that road up to that point. We did that a couple of times in Anderson. We're dealing with that issue in another town I'm working with right now, on how to handle that in their town. Because it's public up to a certain point, but it's basically a two-wheel rutted driveway is essentially all it is, even though they call it a public road. But then once you get to the corner, it turns into a gravel road and it goes down, and it's not officially anything. There is a right-of-way, but it meanders on the other people's property and it's a mess.
The property that I've clicked on there, the property owner has come by and wants to subdivide the property up and have multiple single-family homes built on it. And it's one of those where what ends up happening is I meet with the planning department of Spartanburg County, since it's a lot that's partially in the town. The rest of it is Spartanburg County. Spartanburg County does not allow, they do not allow unless it is on a public road.
What's the, so Spring Street down here, there is, the reason that they can't use that because of that weird strange shaped property that's very elongated there, is that owned by that thing?
They would have to.
Okay, so that
either-
is an actual barrier. That's
They'd either
like-
have to own that property or they'd have to get a road that goes to that property.
Okay.
Where do they think they want to access that?
They want to access it, so it's all part of the same, I believe it's a Vietnamese family, and it's all relatives of the people who built in Towel Drive and that whole community back there.
So what we would have told them is that they needed to acquire additional property and they needed to build a road to access their subdivision, because it's a subdivision, you're dividing it into multiple lots, that they would have to acquire another piece so that they could have access to a private drive, which again, you don't have your own guidelines, so it's whatever the county says, which I don't know that the county's regs address it very well. But that they would have to acquire additional piece of property to get to a public road to be able to access that property, the way this is written now. So that's why we're talking about it, so.
So they can't access it, even if they get permission from the owner of that small little strip, they can't access it from Spring Street? Or if they get permission from the owner, they can then access it through there?
Well, to get through there, they're still going to have to go through this additional property here.
And that's another, okay, that's a whole nother owner, this is not the same, okay.
And I'm not saying you should go one way or another. I'm just saying if that's the case that it needs to be, then
Right.
this will have a problem moving forward.
I think they should stay off the main roads. I think you're gonna end up having neighbors upset. They might have that little property there just so people can't build through roads through there. I think if that's the way it's designed by the county, and that's the standard of everywhere else, then you gotta follow that.
The way the county is set up is you can't build, unless the property has to be adjacent to a public road for you to be able to build a home or any type of structure on the property.
Yeah, I think we should stay with that.
So they bought that without, did they know that when they bought this property?
Sounds like it's.
I mean, I have no idea what they knew or they didn't know, but, yeah,
I mean, if a family owns this, it's gonna take some creative surveying, but they can resurvey the lots and create those flag poles up to Spring the other way, sort of northwest. It's possible, but they decided to divide it strangely, so you know, this is not the only example. I can think of other examples in town that are gonna be a problem. Are those people, well, I guess they already have structures on their properties, and that's that.
Yeah, I mean, you've got this structure right here, which is already built on and does not have access to, I mean, their access, if you can see where their driveway is up there.
Yeah.
It eventually kind of winds its way back to Tao Drive.
Yeah, so at some point, that was probably all one piece of property, and they put the driveway in, and then they subdivided it later, made themselves landlocked, but they had the easement or the traditional right to use that, but,
I think it went in and no one said anything.
So even if someone gives permission to access, like an easement, they couldn't build there?
what I'm saying is that the way I have this written now, no. And the reason I say that.
I have landlocked property in this town.
Right. Well, the reason I say that is because most of my experience with these easements has been the problems that they've caused. And I try to think of it as, what's Patrick gonna have to deal with in the future with these issues if we allow X, or whoever the zoning administrator is for the whatever town we're in. And, you know, they cause more problems than they solve, has been my experience. So, and again, mainly because a lot of them are really old, and they weren't done right, the ownership has changed 4 or 5 times, nobody has records of it. You can maybe find something at the courthouse, but was it really an easement, or did you just let your neighbor do that unofficially? But now you don't like the new neighbor, and so you're telling them they can't do it anymore, and they can't get to their house. So, if you have a road, it doesn't matter, so.
Well, I purchased the house out front to give me road access. But, so say I sold the house out front, I wouldn't be able to build anything else back there because I used my neighbor's driveway?
I mean, if there is an easement already in place,
It is on his deed.
yeah, so that's a legal document that's already in place. This would be, if you don't have if you have a landlocked lot and there's no easement, that's when this would start to apply. But if you already have something there that's on the books, recorded, not just, hey, I'll let you do that, then it's sort of grandfathered in and you work with it that way.
This is for new divided
so-
up parcels, I think.
Well, because I thought about building on that property.
Yeah.
That's why I asked him.
Well, especially if they're planning on dividing the land, you're adding multiple people and you're having to get permission from multiple. I think it just needs to stay off the main road like it is.
I mean, I look at it 2 ways on there. One, I get the idea of it, being on a road, otherwise you end up having a lot of floater homes that are all out in the middle, and how are they accessing, or where are they getting in? Then the other way I look at it is, like for instance, this particular property, Spartanburg County does not allow him to develop his property at all. However, he could annex into the town of Packlet, and he could, because we don't have that regulation.
Yeah.
So if he annexes in what?
If he annexes into the town of Packlet, we don't have the regulation that Spartanburg County does currently.
So we could allow them to,
We could allow them to develop.
but how would they access it?
What's that?
How would they access it? From the other person's driveway?
That's their problem.
Yeah, I don't think.
See, I would tell them,
People
you
mad.
have to have a 50-foot right-of-way, you have to have a 24-foot wide road, you have to have a public road that's built to all the public road standards.
I mean, you've got an easement, you talk to your property owners and you get an easement to be able to traverse through and get all the way across. I'm not saying it's not my problem, like I don't care. It's meaning that, right now Spartanburg County says they cannot develop that property at all because it's not on a public right of way or public road. Now, if they annex the entire property into the town of Packlet, as of right now, we don't have that restriction on there. So you've got that flag, at the very end of that flag up there, you see where it goes right across the same driveway as that other guy who's out there. They just keep on using the same access point. So as long as they've got an easement or an agreement to be able to do that, you can put 4 more homes out there, or 10 more homes out there, or whatever you wanted to put. And, that could be allowed in the town of Packlet, but it's not allowed in Spartanburg County.
Would the easement cover things for them? Like, I've never actually seen an easement written out, but like, say that you go and you talk to your neighbor and you're like, I want an easement, I'm gonna build back here. And they think, oh, you're referring to like, you're gonna build your nice little house out in the back and have this all property.
The
Does
easement that I'm talking about is just
specify-
being able to cross their property to be able to drive through it.
Yeah, but I'm saying like, when you write out an easement document like that, like I'd be really mad. Say this guy came up to me and I was like, yeah, sure, you can drive back there, you're gonna have a house back there. But then I find out he's building 5 houses back there and one of them's gonna be up on top of me. I don't wanna give him that easement anymore. So does the easement get that specific? It's just you can or you can't, or is it an easement with conditional terms, or, cause like I said, I mean,
Usually it would have to be in perpetuity, so forever, if you're given the easement, because why would you allow them to develop it if you didn't know they're gonna have access to that property forever? And
Well,
why would
see-
you buy a house there?
but
you
see,
know?
that's where it gets hairy. Like now
Right.
you have neighbors bickering, cause I thought when you asked me for easement, I'm like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead, move back in there, get you a house back in, and we won't see each other but every now and then. But then now you have a house built right up on my property line. Like, I think that the state regulates that stuff for that kind of reason, or the
That's an
county
agreement
does for
between
that
property
kind of
owners, I mean, they can probably be written 100 different ways, so. I mean, the town is not party to that agreement, that's between that property owner and whoever's property he's going across, so.
Yeah, but people are so funny when you start building a bunch of stuff in this town.
Let's think about that one some more and come back to that. All right, 4-5.3 corner lots. Basically, if you have a corner lot, what this says is that both road frontages are considered front yards, and you have to meet the front yard setbacks for both lots, because you don't want the house right on top of the road, so you have that little bit extra setback along both of those. Determination of buildable area, basically, that's all that area inside your required setback lines. Whatever they are for that particular district, that would be your buildable area.
With the corner lots on there, does that also mean that the backyard ends up kind of having that same thing too? Because you have a situation where your backyard is basically facing the side of your neighbor's property? Is that,
Yeah, so I mean, you would have, say it's on a corner like that, and your house is facing this street, so you have front yard, front yard. If your house is facing this street, you need to have rear yard and side yard. And then further down, if you see double frontage lots, so if you have a road at the front and a road at the back, those are both front yards for setback purposes as well. If you have the whole block, then you have 4 front yards. So, or the bank in Anderson takes up the whole block, it's surrounded by 4 roads, so they technically have 4 front yards. And so basically what that's doing is, keeping you off the road a little bit, so you don't have visibility issues, it's a safety thing, because that front yard is usually a little bit bigger than the side yard would be. And so, where it comes into play usually is if you're platting a new subdivision, you need to make sure that they understand that, so when they're platting their lots, they have that allowance in there for that little bit extra. Because your 50 by 100 lot, all of a sudden, is now a lot smaller because you didn't account for that extra, say, 10 feet of front yard setback. And so that is very typical language you see in most ordinances. Lot of record, basically everything has to be on established lot of record, meet the setback requirements, and only build in the buildable area. Exceptions to front yard requirements. So the front yard setback, the setback requirements of this ordinance shall not apply to any lot where the average setback of already built lots located wholly or in part within 100 feet of each such lot and within the block and zoning district fronting on the same street is less than the minimum required setback. So for example, you see this a lot in older neighborhoods, mill villages, where the zoning now might say you have to have a 25-foot front yard setback. Well, all those houses were built 15 feet off the road. And so you have a vacant lot in there, rather than have everything built to one standard, and then you have this one house that looks strange now because it's 10 feet further back than everybody else. This makes some allowance for that to allow you to develop in a consistent manner without having to go through a bunch of hoops and get a variance and all that.
Is that just for like, so for infill, as long as?
That's where it's gonna come up, is on infill development, right?
And we've got that case with a developer right now on, what's that road that Anthony's on? Fuller Street, where all the homes that are out there are built more than 12, or no, the restrictions for the homes that were built by Enchanted Homes out there were that all the homes had to be built, I think, within 10 or 15 feet off of the road. And that was during a time where you didn't have a zoning administrator or probably a town administrator. And so they just built them where they wanted to. And so now that they're there, there's another person who's wanting to build something in an infill lot next door to it. And now that we're catching it, he can only build it 10 feet off. So you got all these other homes that are back here, but the restriction means that they're down here. But what we're doing is based on the zoning ordinance, it says any type of infill, whatever is currently being out there, you just match whatever is currently out there.
Yeah. Is that, that's, yeah.
Yeah, and so this would say, the last sentence of that, however, in no case shall setbacks be less than 15 feet. So if it's gonna be 10 feet, then you might have to get a variance for that, or, because you would enforce what's in your zoning, not what's in their subdivision regs or, you know, their private covenants and restrictions, so.
I could see a case where you could have something less than 15 feet on some neat little townhouses, but I
Yeah,
get it.
but again, I mean, you still have a mechanism for that.
Right.
You know, if it's something
Beautiful
new, a
PDD.
new project, then you do it as a PDD or an FRD, and you can set whatever limit you want. Is with the infill, that this is really gonna apply to only that, so. And then for the rear yard setback, porch steps, handicap ramps, fire escapes may project into a rear yard for a distance not exceeding 10 feet. So, you know, your rear yard setback is gonna be from the back property line, you know, the wall of the house. Can't be any closer than that distance, but if you have steps that come straight out back, it gives you a little allowance for that.
So if you had a big deck that needed a lot of stairs to go off the back of it, it would
Right.
need needing like a switchback, or it couldn't go straight out the back of the property. You have to go adjacent to the deck itself.
Right. Okay, non-conforming uses.
Questions about that, sorry,
Yes.
real quick. So, for instance, say somebody has an existing deck that didn't meet that standard on their yard or whatever. If it's in disrepair, are they allowed to tear it down and put it back because it had already existed, or when
Once
they
you tear
build
it
it
down,
back?
once you tear it down, and then that's the next
Okay.
section we're gonna talk about, but non-conforming uses. So that would be non-conforming, you know, legally allowed to remain as long as it remained and was in good condition, but once it's torn down, then it falls under this non-conforming language here, which we'll talk about.
It's kind of like with our, when O'Reilly's came in, once they tore up the entire asphalt that was there, they had to conform to our parking lot standards. If they would have kept some portion of that parking lot still there intact, they could have used it as a repair.
So if they keep a portion, like say some of it's rotted, if the basic framing stays, they can continue to keep.
I would interpret it that way.
50% is kind of your number that we're gonna talk
Okay.
about here.
Okay.
So basically what you're saying by
Sorry.
making it non-conforming is that it's incompatible with what you want to see moving forward. However, to avoid undue hardship, you can continue to use it until the following. It's changed to another non-conforming use. So, shall not be changed to another non-conforming use. So you have an area that's zoned single-family residential and it has a non-conforming commercial business in it. That commercial business goes away for a certain amount of time, it cannot come back. Doesn't mean you can change it to a non-conforming office building or a non-conforming industrial use. It has to just comply with what the zoning is. Cannot be reused or reoccupied for the same non-conforming use after discontinuance of use for a period exceeding 4 consecutive months. So that commercial business goes out, there's no business in there for 6 months, it can't go back to being a business. It has to comply with the underlying zoning that's in place now.
To give you an example, There is a property at 7396 Pine Street, or I'm sorry, East Main Street. It's a commercial building and it's currently in a zoning district. His roof is in need of repair. If he repairs the roof, it's not a problem, but he's also talked about just tearing the whole building down and starting over, and he couldn't, because if he tears the building down and starts over, it would be like building a brand-new building on the site, and it's not allowed in that particular district.
But because if you just do the roof, most of that building remains, okay.
Right, and that's exactly the next section. Reestablished, reoccupied, or replaced with the same or similar building or land use after physical removal or relocation from a specific site location at the time of passage of this ordinance. So you can't tear it down and rebuild, it has to comply with the underlying zoning. You can't pick it up, move it over, anything like that. Cannot be repaired, rebuilt, or altered after damage exceeding 50% of its replacement cost. Reconstruction or repair, when legal, must begin within 4 months after damage is incurred. And it cannot be enlarged or altered in a way which increases its nonconformity. You can do ordinary maintenance, you can't do an addition that makes the space bigger because that increases the nonconforming status. But you can do safety repairs, you can repaint, you can re-roof, you can do all that sort of thing. You can't make it bigger, you can't do anything that increases. So if say it's a mixed-use building and only a portion of it is nonconforming, you can't expand it into the rest of the building because that's increasing the nonconforming status. What do you think about the 4-month timeline? I see 4 months a lot, I see 6 months a lot. Any thoughts on that? And we have gone in and we have looked at water bills. We've asked people to give us rent receipts to prove that things were in operation, in the intervening period, because they didn't want to switch it over to something else. So sometimes you had to do some work to really ensure that it really was vacant for that time period.
Is this the vacancy thing on here?
So this is,
Because the 4 months, it has to be repaired.
and number 2 and number 4 there. So reused or reoccupied for the same nonconforming use after it's discontinued. So you have that commercial business, it's his own residential, he goes out of business, there's no business in there for 4 months. It can't be reestablished as the same nonconforming use, it would have to go back to the underlying zoning.
So right here on 176, I'm sorry, on 9, there are 3 mobile home units that are back here.
Yes.
It is in a commercial district. It's my understanding that once they are stopped, they're not rented for more than 6 months. At that point, they can no longer be used as residential at that point.
Correct. And this would say 4 months, so, but, I mean, whatever time frame you want to put in there. But this says 4 months, again, I see 4 and 6 a lot in these ordinances.
And with the fact that it says must begin, so say that it is something it doesn't have to be done in that 4 months. So
Right,
say
you have to have a plan, you have to
Okay.
have a building permit, you have to start work.
Yep.
Or again, the other case where it's just vacant for 4 months, you can't go back to a non-conforming use, so.
Yeah, I think 4 months is very fair to get the ball rolling on something if you're gonna do it.
I mean, again, the point is, you're saying you don't want this moving forward. So if you really don't, then I think 4 months and let's go, so.
Yeah.
But is this saying that, and I want to make sure that number 4 on here, is it saying that if damage has occurred and you don't repair the damage after 4 months, are you
No.
still able to repair the damage?
If you begin it though, right? Like as long
You
as
have to have a
it's
permit
begun.
and show work. I mean, a
In
permit is
that
not gonna be enough, in my opinion. You have to show some work activity taking place. 'Cause, I
Okay.
mean, you can get a permit and let it sit for another year, or 6 months, or however long you allow permits for. So you're doing this to trigger activity, so to fix the problem. So, yes, we'll give you some leeway,
2 months.
it's 40% of your building burned down, that's 40% of the replacement value, but we can't just let it sit there and rot, so, which is what happens, so. All right, and so then the next section is the non-conforming signs. In a residential or commercial district where the sign does not comply with the provisions of the ordinance, The sign and supporting structures may be maintained, but shall not be replaced, reconstructed, moved, structurally altered, repainted, etc., except in compliance with the provisions of this ordinance, and may continue in use unless subject to removal under other provisions of this ordinance. If you remove it all for any reason, then it loses its non-conforming status. Supporting structures may continue in use for a conforming sign if said supporting structures comply in all respects. Usually the issue there is going to be a height issue. No permits for additional signs shall be issued for any premises on which there are any non-conforming signs. So you can't have a non-conforming sign and say, I also want this other sign. No, you got to fix this other problem first. So. I think that's a good place to stop.
Absolutely.
So, the section we skipped was parking. We need to go back and talk about that. And then, so you got home occupation, some more general language, group living standards and cell towers, mobile commercial structures, bed and breakfast, and administration enforcement, that'd be easy to go through. That's mostly stuff about the Board of Zoning Appeals and things like that, so.
Can you send me a PDF copy of this?
Of this as it is right now? Yes.
As it is right now?
Yep. And so we'll pick up that next time. I think next time we should be able to get through all the corrections there. So maybe March then, we have a pretty complete document for you to review. And if everybody's happy with it, then we can do a public hearing. You all can vote on it at, March or April, and then go for kind of nip any problems in the bud there with other council members who haven't been part of it.
I think another thing that would be worthwhile is that, it's very easy to go through this with you, and, a lot of it kind of gets in the weeds and not really take it all in, and y'all may not do what I do is I'll take it home on a weekend and I'll read through it cover to cover. But there may be, I think it'd be worthwhile for y'all to think through some scenarios that you'd like to see or you don't want to see in Packlet, and then basically bring them up here to be able to test the zoning ordinance, to be able to see, does that allow it, does it not allow it? And kind of think of creative things that you want or don't want to happen.
Is there any way that we maybe can, I know it would probably be a little tricky, like when we did the comprehensive plan with the survey to hear back from people, that was great. But I don't know if general residents have enough interest in zoning. Like something like that, is there a way that we can ask questions, like what do you want to do to your property in Packlet? Like instead of a survey, because that would be too broad, people would have too many questions. But, maybe something on the website saying, hey, here's your chance, residents.
Well, when we do a public hearing, we'll have the PDF of it available on the website. We'll have a couple of hard copies here for the people who want to come in and look at it. We provide all that, when you get ready to do public hearings, so people have a chance to thumb through it and ask questions. And that's why the zoning map, we try to do as best we can to keep everybody conforming as much as possible. And so if you have a house, our hope is that it's zoned appropriately for what you have. And we try to keep that in mind when we're assigning the districts so that you don't have problems in the future. So basically, whatever you're doing now, you can do in the future as much as possible. And so there should be very few, if any, where somebody's use is changing that's going to affect them in a poor manner, I think. So.
Yeah, I think so too. I think you've done really good with keeping that consistent.
Without holding you here much longer, so while we have this screen up, you'll notice this building, what we call the old Coleman store on the corner of West Main Street and 150.
Like 7091 there?
110. What do you say?
It'd be 110.
Top right,
Yeah. It's labeled 110 West Main
Oh,
Street.
okay, I see it now.
You
On
see
West
how
Main
it's,
there.
you see how it's built
Yeah.
into the right of way?
Yep.
And it's been vacant for a while, but this is considered like what I would call a legacy store, legacy building in town. So how do we accommodate for, you know, under what we're talking about non-conforming, this would not be able to be used, I believe. I mean, it's built way within the right of way. We don't want those buildings to become tear downs.
You could use it now. The only way it would, because basically it's there already.
Okay.
And so it's grandfathered in, it's legally non-conforming. And so the only problem would be, you know,
What's non-conforming on, I mean, what's,
the use, as long as it's maintained and it's active, then the use is what we're talking about there, more so than the structure in this case.
Even though it's been
If
empty.
the whole thing has to go down, so there's a fire, or, you know, 18-wheeler hits it because it's right on top of the road, then that's where you might have a situation where you might have to rebuild it and move it on that site in the future. But for now, as long as it's there, it's in an active use.
Well,
there's
it's
nothing
not,
that would
it's
say
not
that
actively
they have
used.
to move the building.
No,
Yeah,
no,
but
it's
h-
empty.
how is it
hasn't been
non-conforming?
actively used
what's that?
for.
How is it non-conforming? That's the
I
business
guess-
district,
Is it-
right?
And
Yeah, that's a
according
good
to
question.
that, it looks like it's built over the property line, it's in the public right of way.
Oh, because of the right of way.
Yeah.
That's what's making
So-
it non-conforming,
So
okay.
it is currently not being used and hasn't for a while, so,
It's a commercial building in a commercial district, I think it would be allowed to be reused. But,
okay.
I mean, I don't think the town would say anything, you know.
In
It's
these,
already there, I don't know that DOT would say anything unless,
GIS maps are not always 100% accurate.
No,
So-
but this actually is, because I know from intimate experience, the other property line is right where it's supposed to be. So I know what you're saying, the shift, the photo does line up almost exactly.
we've never
But-
made anybody move a building. So it's really about the use of the building with the zoning.
Yeah.
Okay.
The building's already there, and it's built in the wrong spot, you know, and how old's that building?
100 and,
Right, and
120 years
It
old.
could very well have been built appropriately when it was built, and they widened the road, and they took more right of way.
Yeah, the only concern was if it's not used or touched for 4 months, if that's gonna be the wording, then would they be able to renovate and open?
I think they would be able to renovate and open. We've never told anybody they had to move the building. You know,
Okay.
if it was too close to the property line or anything, the building was already there.
Okay.
If they put a use in that building that's legal in that zoning category, I think they would be fine.
Okay.
But you've got the same thing, if you look at 261, 241 up there, partially, part of those homes are considered on that. I
Yeah.
see what you're saying on
Yeah,
there.
they're occupied though.
Right, but
They
I don't think,
trigger that, right?
if you have seen his plat, and does his plat say that the property is in the right-of-way of the town?
Oh, I don't know.
And that's the thing is just because it's on here, doesn't mean it's 100%, like, I would never use what's on GIS as a survey for my property.
No, but
But it's
you
not
can
either
tell,
way. It probably doesn't meet the requirements either way, even if it's right on the property line.
you could tell because it's built right up to the road, yeah, I mean, it's,
I mean, there's a
Right up to
sidewalk
the road.
between it. There's enough space. You can walk down the sidewalk beside it. That's good.
Yeah, we would not tell them they had to do anything with the building in that
Okay.
case.
Yeah, it would just-
The only way we would tell them that is if, again, if it was burnt, more than 50% of its value, and they had to replace the building, then that new building would have to meet the requirements.
What if a situation came up, because this is the old banana box building you're talking about, right? What if a situation came up where it was like moldy? Because that building probably needs a lot of help, a lot of love. So if it comes up like a DHEC issue when they're trying to get this stuff,
That wouldn't be your zoning, that would be
Okay.
addressing that. So if for some reason the building department said that building was in such poor shape that it had to be condemned, and then that would be through the building code, not through zoning. And so it's their standards that would be in place there. And then if for that reason they had to tear it down because it was condemned, then whatever they built on their new would have to meet your current zoning guidelines. So it'd have to
No, it's literally right on the sidewalks on the.
So that's right here, so actually, with your new zoning, that's gonna be in your central business district, which wouldn't have any setback. So they could build right up to the property lines. So,
Would it, I mean, it also go under what's called a prescriptive easement. If it's always been, even if it ends up being in the right of way, if it has been used for it's the same thing as like, for instance, if a driveway, if my driveway goes through someone else's property and we've been using it as such for the last 20 years, you can file what's called a prescriptive easement on there. So even though that property is not within their own right of way on there, because of the fact they've been using it for more than 20 years, that could end up filing under a prescriptive easement.
Yeah, the question is, were they using it though? You know, I'm only bringing it up because it's an unused building. I would just want to see these unused buildings used, and when they go to use them, would it be like, sorry, you're outside of that 4 or 6 month window? That's why I brought it up. These other ones that might be non-conforming are in use, they're occupied, so they'd be obviously grandfathered in.
yeah, I would say, think
I wouldn't
more
say-
of.
as long as I'm here, it
use
won't be a
in the
problem. I don't
building,
think it's a
not the
problem.
physical structure. So,
Okay.
because I mean, you could have a physical structure that's a commercial building in a residential district, the commercial use goes out, you can still take that commercial building and convert it into a residence and use that same building.
I see what you're saying.
So,
Okay.
It looks like it's got solar panels.
I'm gonna guess the right of way expanded over time, because that's pretty bad,
Yeah.
if that's really where the line is, so.
Well, yeah, if you watch a 18-wheeler traveling south on 150 trying to turn on West Main Street,
Right,
I've seen them drive into the gravel
yep.
on the railroad.
Yeah, they have them cut across the corners right here.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be a lot that you'll see like that, and every town is like that. And look at that 181 there, I mean, that doesn't mean any kind of setback requirements either, all those buildings on there,
Well, that's urban center. There's zero
yeah,
setbacks. So,
So-
but yeah, it looks like it's over the line.
but,
They're
All
all,
right,
they're all
thanks, sir.
temporary buildings that they've been there for a while now.
It's temporary. Yeah.
all right, well, unless you have any other questions tonight, then we'll reconvene in February. I guess I'll make new copies with all this updates in them, so. I'll make new copies of the full book next time for everybody, so you'll have that, with the updates from what we talked about this time, and, then we'll just pick up on the areas that are still remaining, so.
I don't have any comments to provide to y'all under my comments unless there's any comments from anybody else.
When's the next meeting?
It'll be, what do we say, February?
Have those scheduled for the year, or are they gonna be the first Monday after the town council?
It'll be the Monday after the council meeting, so the next one will end up being, February 10th.
10th.
Are there any more comments?
One other comment that I do want to make is, it has been set up that, and I can change this, but it has been set up that, planning commission meetings start at, 5:30. If y'all are okay with that, we could do 5:30 from now on. That enables, if you end up having a BZA meeting, that they would meet at 6. Do y'all want to stay at 6, or do you want to go to 5:30?
I'm good with 5:36 either one.
Y'all good with 5:30?
That works.
Okay, we'll do 5:30 from now on the 10th.
5:30 is great for me.
Okay, since there's no more comments,
I make a motion to adjourn.
second?
I second.